Hello, and welcome back to 40 Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. First, I'd like to wish you all a very big Happy New Year. I hope you've all managed to rest and relax over the festive and holiday seasons, and you are recharged and raring to go for 2025. To bring in the new year, we're looking back on 2024 one last time. If you follow JBM on LinkedIn or are an avid 40 Minute Mentor listener, you may recall that we ran a big survey at the end of the year to collect votes for your favourite 40 Minute Mentor of 2024. We asked for votes across three different categories: favourite VC featured on the show, favourite 40 Minute Mentor founder, and your favourite topic that was covered. We've had numerous votes come in for each category and some really close results at the top. So for today's episode, I'll be sharing the results alongside a little teaser clip from each of the episodes you've chosen. So first up, your favourite VC. In tiered third place, we have Hannah Leach, partner at Houghton Street Ventures and co-founder of Venture ESG, and Gideon Valkin of Andrena Ventures.
Did you find when you started in VC a particular aspect that was much harder because, say, you didn't come from the traditional background? What was the hardest part of that transition?
One is mentally, psychologically. I have to constantly battle against this. It's really hard. The whole industry it's full of very successful people and of people who have had this I want to say a little bit of a standard path. And it's hard to look at your background and actually put yourself on an even level with them to say my background is as valid or it's as good, because the whole industry doesn't really recognize that. So actually I've had to do a lot of work in looking back and saying actually my background is valid and is good for this role and does work, and I do offer a lot of value. And the next thing is fundraising. So fundraising, obviously Adam, my partner, was at Goldman, founded Scalable Capital, incredibly impressive background, lovely human. And he's the LSE Goldman Scalable Unicorn founder, white male. And it's hard. It's wonderful working with him, but sometimes it can be hard in the sense that people compare us. People look at me and say, "Oh, you're the nice and fluffy one. You're the warm and fluffy one." But Adam's the person who's going to give me the return. So fundraising can be brutal in that respect. But it, got highlighted the other day. I think on our old deck, we had Adam was defined as unicorn founder, something, and then mine was super connector with a moral compass. And this female LP said to us, I didn't really realize how you position yourself, but it doesn't sound good. So a lot of it is personal confidence and reflection, but the fundraising process constantly is someone kind of whipping you slightly.
Half of all the unicorn outcomes in the UK are fintech companies, more than a third in continental Europe. And for whatever reason, and there's lots of reasons, and that's also a conversation maybe for another time, but for whatever reasons, you've had this massive concentration of talent around these first generation fintech companies. And you fast forward over the last 10 years and you fast forward to today, and so many of the founding teams that everyone wants to back are teams coming out of this ecosystem. And so that's kind of the macro. And then on the micro, I realized these founders, they want the big lead investor, of course, but then that's gotten very competitive. If you're trying to lead seed rounds in Europe, you're competing with Sequoia and Excel and everyone, and it's getting expensive, etc. So you kind of want one of those, but then you want an angel who is got experience that you respect and that's relevant, has time to help you, can really be objective and help you put the best round together and not pose a signaling risk for the future. And for me, I really valued those angel-like relationships that I had when I was angel investing kind of before Entree. And so just felt like that was a role that I could fill in the ecosystem. And I'd also seen, I'm certainly not the first, I've seen peers start to do that already, see that it's possible, and very much wanted to be on that bandwagon, right? One of my solo GP peers calls us the Rebel Alliance, trying to change venture for the better. So I think the combination of seeing this where we were in the European ecosystem, seeing that I could play a real role in filling a gap, and also being an insider as an ex-fintech founder and operator, I think is crucial. So for all those reasons, I would say that's what motivated me to go and do it.
That's awesome. And how was the process of raising a fund, like a solo GP fund? Tell us a bit about that.
In 2 words, very difficult. Anyone that's ever raised a fund will tell you it's difficult. Then layer on top of that, being a first-time manager with no DPI, that's actual capital return to investors, even tougher, right? Like even more difficult than the average experience. Now layer on top of that, doing it in the worst market in the history of tech. I think it's safe to say we've never had a worse market for tech specifically since it's existed. And it's, arguably impossible. So more than anything, I'm just so grateful to the, I think, 23 people and institutions that kind of took a punt on me, have gotten to know me over the years and worked with me and kind of put me into business. I'm very, very fortunate to actually be in business, given all the things I said before.
The runner-up in the VC category is Sandra Schwarzer, VP C-Suite Board and EU Talent Community and Insights Team Leader at Index Ventures.
You alluded to talent there and the importance of it, and you know a lot about this topic. So I wanted to start by asking for any secrets to success that you picked up along the way about when it comes to hiring like that exceptional top 1% of talent, because it is the hardest part of the job in my experience. It's why I have a career, but it's also the thing that I find hardest at JBM to do. So what is your advice and any secrets to success you've learned?
I think one, and that's probably the most difficult, is figuring out what do you really need. And then it's not just the role, but it's really looking at the future, at the competencies you need in your organization, and figuring out how you build a very complementary team rather than having people who are just all of the same. And that's very hard to do when you've never scaled a business before, when you're all of a sudden going into a stage of growth that you haven't done before, because you have to learn everything. So being very open with your investors and your network on what you want to learn about certain roles, about what excellence looks like, and figuring out how do you take from these people that you meet the learning back into your own organization and create a role. What does that mean? Does it mean you have to have a different structure? Do you have the right people? You have to think about the shift in demand. Like right now, we're seeing a lot of companies obviously focusing on profitability more than they may have done in previous years, where the focus was much more on growth and like very, very fast growth. And so figuring out what does it mean for my organization to be successful in the future? What are the skills I need and where do I get them? I think the second thing that I'm sometimes surprised by is how vast the list of skills and competencies and experiences is that you would like. And the default is almost sometimes to say, like, I want people who have done this exact job at company XYZ. And it's a very small pool. Instead of really going underneath, well, what does that actually mean? And how do we figure out whether these people are successful, right? So we do spend some time also on what is a structured competency interview and how do you think about competencies and how do you get better at doing this? And then finally is like having your story straight. Like you need to be able, particularly in this market, you need to bring people along. So you need to think about what's my value proposition for my employees? Where do I want to take them? You need to think about, especially when you're a small and unknown entity, how do you use employee stock option grants to attract people, to make them feel like they're really part of the organization and part of the success. And when I think about Index, like one of the things we've been doing for over 10 years is to enhance and help Europe change its legislation so that more countries offer a very advantageous tax program when it comes to stock options. We actually the other day calculated how European companies approach equity and the changes in legislation, and employees in Europe now own $5 billion more than they did 5 years ago. So it's paying off, but there's a lot there. And then the final thing, and that's really resilience. It is not a fast mix. Like it is hard to hire. You will get it wrong. Not every hire, no matter how great they are, is the right fit for your organization or will land well. It doesn't stop at hiring. That's when the hard work starts. The onboarding, the making sure people are successful, the building a team, and particularly on the executive level, building that team, that takes a lot of time and resilience. And so you just need to give yourself as well a longer term perspective rather than I'm just going to fill the hires and then everything is going to be fine.
And our VC category winner is none other than the Queen of British VC, Eileen Burbidge MBE herself, founding partner at Passion Capital and director at Fatifa.
Even though there is no recipe book. There's no playbook. There's no obvious way to do it. There's no way to know if you're making the right call or not. You have to do it. Founders, leaders, you have to surround yourself with really good people. You cannot do it alone. And actually, it'll be a shortcoming if you believe that you can or you decide that you want to do that. So it is a show of leadership to trust in other people, to show that you can collaborate with other people, that you can delegate to them, that you can channel, that you can develop them, that you can take out their strengths and their weaknesses, and then also supplement people around them as well. The only advice I would give is you're going to spend a lot of time with this person. You're going to want to trust them with decisions that you can't or don't have time to take. You need to live with that. So make sure that that's a person that you feel that you can do that with. Don't just bring them in because their CV looks great, because they were just at your largest competitor, because they were, whatever you think, because your VC recommended it. It's got to be someone that you're going to feel happy to be beholden to a certain degree. And the other thing I would say is, with equity, on the one hand, don't be too stingy, because as we all know, creating a bigger pie together makes more sense than trying to be stingy on, like percentages of a percentage point. On the other hand, the other thing I would say, especially with executive hires, is you can always add to an equity grant if it's working out really well. So that's one way to think about compensation, maybe, is to break up or to actually think about how you stage the overall equity, because obviously a new executive coming in says, listen, when we get to an exit, I want to own, I want to have this much of the business at that time. That's great. Then think of a plan of how you work up towards that versus maybe offering that in a package that vests from day one.
Great advice. Thank you, Eileen. And before I wrap up questions, I've got to ask about DE&I. It's a topic we're both passionate about. And there has been advancements, but I think we'd all agree that there's still so much work to be done. So just to maybe if we could sharpen the minds of any investors or founders listening, what do we need to focus on to make some more improvement in the year and years ahead?
I think the first thing we have to do is stop saying that we try to get deal flow and it's not in the deal flow, I guess, or that we're just not seeing entrepreneurs, or those more diverse entrepreneurs aren't coming to us. I think we need more people on a wholesale basis to recognize we need to change the way we source our deal flow and the sources for that. And it's incumbent on us as investors to do that. The other thing we need to do is really just take a hard look at ourselves and the actions and the behaviors that we do, and to see how that might be projecting onto the types of people we want to attract if we genuinely want to attract more diverse people. I won't name names, but there's a really well-known fund who just concluded an internal investigation about some inappropriate behavior, and they've decided that there was nothing conclusive to prevent the original partner from coming back. Is that going to scream out to people that they are an inclusive place, that they recognize what people value, if they come from diverse pathways? I would say no. And so I think as an industry, I think we've really got to walk the walk.
Seeing all the incredible VCs that we've had on the podcast in 2024 was a real pinch me moment. Eileen is a deserved winner. I can't think of a better set of mentors for any founders that are fundraising or looking to get into VC. Alongside our VC feature series, our main seasons focused on founders, where we covered a number of specialist topics this year. The top 3 topics we covered in 2024 were hiring advice, neurodiversity, and conflict management. Here are some clips covering all 3 topics, featuring some of the JBM team, Aninye Odokporo and Amy Gallo.
I think in general, I don't think people, pay as much attention as they used to CVs, which is a problem, as they are very much not dead. I like when people start with a strong summary that highlights the sort of key strengths that they have. I like a CV that is tailored for an application and also keep it quite succinct. I think if you have 25 years of experience, you still cannot have more than a 2-page CV. So focus on the most relevant and recent experience and focus on how you want to get across. I think at the end of the day, your CV can be a very smart way of leading where you want the interviewer to go into as well.
When I'm looking through CVs, I'm looking for what have you done? What are your tangible outcomes? What are your achievements? What is the bread and butter of what you do? Definitely, be clear on job title, company. I quite like it when people include what the company is and a little bit of information about that, just so that and then just some clear bullet points on key responsibilities and then some key achievements or outcomes.
One of the things I'd like to see more in CVs is people really trying to communicate their personality a little bit through it. It doesn't need to be a purely dry document. It's a sales tool and you're selling yourself. So really think about the way that you're writing about the jobs you've had, and the way you're presenting that data to people is saying about who you are.
Biggest mistake I see is in job descriptions. They're so unclear. Not only are they unclear, many of them are designed in a way, why are you typing your job description in Times New Roman font size 11, no line spacing? You could easily pick a dyslexia-friendly font. You could easily make it bigger. Digital space is free. It's not like you're printing it out. And you could easily put in some line spacing that means that a dyslexic individual is able to read the advert that you are putting out for this job. So that would be my first thing, is providing clear, accessible information about the role, and also thinking about advertising in different ways. I'd love to see video ads. I'd love to see audio ads, more accessible ways of hiring individuals. In terms of retention, flexibility, and this goes for the big organizations and the small ones. My big organizations are far too rigid, which really puts neurodivergent people off. You said hybrid working. I said I'll come in on Tuesday and Thursday. Why are you telling me I'm not within the bounds of my contract and you're telling me I have to come in on Monday and Wednesday? What difference does it make? Flexibility is crucial. But then for my smaller organizations, too flexible. It's like a playground. There's no rules. And if you are autistic, for example, those rules are quite important because you end up not really knowing how to navigate that workplace or that environment, because you've kind of been left to your own devices and you're not naturally inclined to do the socially acceptable thing. And then lastly, I would say for all organizations, in terms of hiring and retention and really growing as an organization, fostering a supportive environment, fostering a supportive neuro-inclusive culture, but also focusing on peer support. I want to work with organizations that are willing to build networks for neurodivergent individuals, or are willing to collab with networks. So I have clients who are now doing like neurodiversity and women's networks events. And in those events, we focus on what it's like to be a neurodivergent woman. So it's really tailored and it's really making that the most of that near to peer or peer to peer support. And that doesn't cost you anything.
I would say 95% of the organizations I work with hire me because there's not enough conflict. And they're actually looking to do exactly what you asked. So I'll share some of my biggest tips, which is number one, talk about disagreements, normalize it. Say things like, it is inevitable that we will not see eye to eye. Let's make sure we surface those disagreements so we can work through them. Don't say that once. Say it to the point when you say it, your team rolls their eyes. They're like, yes, I get it, James. Okay, we're going to disagree. Because just like you are conflict averse, many, many people are. And so you have to really help them get over the hurdle of because it's so much easier to stay silent, to not raise the disagreement, to just be like, wouldn't it be better if things just move? But we want people to voice those ideas. We want to work through them together. So I think you really have to to normalize it. When tensions come up, you have to work really hard not to shut it down, because again, that will be your instinct. And to even narrate like, ooh, wow, this is really uncomfortable for me because I tend to be conflict averse, but this is an important conversation. Let's stick with it, right? Just so the team knows, because again, everyone's looking for the exit. As soon as the conflict comes up, like, how do we get out of this? How do we smooth it? And I see this happen all the time. Like a conflict comes up and everyone's like, well, I think it's going to be okay. Oh, or they'll say like, oh, you guys can take that offline and discuss. It's like, no, we need to work it through, and it's going to be uncomfortable.
Finally, we've got our top 3 founders featured on the podcast in 2024. This category attracted a lot of votes, and it was a very close call. We ended up with joint 3rd and 2nd places. So in 3rd place, we have Greg Marsh, ex-Did founder of One Fine Stay and founder of Nouse, and Deirdre O'Neill, co-founder of Hertility, a fantastic femtech startup.
What I found hard about it was that sense that often, for extended periods of time, you feel as if the chances of failure and the chances of success are in the balance. There are days when you wake up and think, this is it, we're going to be the next Google. And then you wake up the next morning and it's like, it's all over. We're going to fail. There's no two ways about it. The reality is neither of those things is true. Something in the middle is probably going to be what happens. And what that could mean might be a sort of slow path towards failure. It could be a gradual path towards success, somewhere on that line. But the chances of it ever being a slam dunk overnight success or a total catastrophic failure are actually much lower than our sort of overactive imaginations and our stress response might lead us to believe. The game is to manage yourself. And managing yourself is really easy. Managing your own reactions to that level of anxiety and risk. It's a very easy thing to say. It's extremely hard to do.
We've had actually in the space of a year, we've had over 33,000 people apply to work at Hertility, which is mind-blowing. And it just will tell you the shift of employee expectations now. People want to work for something with purpose and they want meaning in their work. They don't just want a sort of 9 to 5. They want to know that they're impacting the world in some way, whether it's sort of through their recycling outcomes or their it's either planet or people. My approach to hiring people has really changed. I think that to begin with, you can't help but have a certain sense of naivety. You never know what to expect. I'm also quite old school in sort of like the academics being very important and someone's sort of level of respect, what they wear, everything is important to me. I think that there's a new wave of hoodies up and slouching back, and that, to be honest, to me isn't something that you should bring to an interview. I think that my change in terms of how I interview people and what I look for, you have to have worked at a startup, because you just do not get it if you have not worked at a startup. And I think some of the times that where people have gone, they're like, it's chaotic and it's so fast paced. And I'm like, if you want a steamship, get on a steamship. It's big and it's fancy and it's comfy. We're a motherfucking speedboat. And if you want to get on, get wet and get fast, that's how we're going to go, because the environment we're in, it is sink or be drowned, and you have to move fast and you have to be agile and you have to be on the pulse of absolutely everything. And if you want a slower pulse, you get on the steamship. And I think I used to try and maybe sugarcoat it a little bit for people, and now I don't. Now I'm like, yes, we are high fives and butt slaps all the way, but we're also, you have to work hard and show up.
In joint second place, we have Avion Gray of the fantastic early stage fintech Belong, and Richard Robinson, founder and CEO of Robin AI, one of the fastest growing companies in the legal tech space.
So unless you come from a wealthy background, you really have time and money at the same time. So when you're younger, you have a lot of time ahead of you, but you have less capital to put to work. And that leads to kind of waiting and a bit of inertia and waiting till you build up that capital that you feel you have enough to get started. And then when you're older, you tend to have more capital, but less time. And so we found that to be a problem. And we sought to correct that paradox. And that's what we're doing. So Belong is all about sustainable long-term wealth building for young people. And we're looking to correct that paradox by really encouraging people to get into investing earlier in life with more capital. And that more capital part is really in the form of our pioneering Boost Loan offering, which we can get into. And I think there's also another side of Belong, which is, and it really speaks to Sam, my co-founder's experience, which is tackling, uncovering, acknowledging, cracking open some of the emotional and behavioral blockers and biases that negatively influence our financial decision making.
I think fundraising is not fun. It's the first thing I would say. It's not a pleasant experience, because most founders, I think, are like this. You put your heart and your soul into building a business. So when someone says, I don't want to invest, it's like they're saying, I don't believe in you. And that's a very painful thing, at least for me, to hear and cope with when you're giving so much. But you can't take it personally, even though it's personal. So it's extremely difficult. I would say, for me, I've learned a few things. Number one, you really need to run it as a rigid process. You got to have a clear plan, clear deadlines, database with everyone you're going to speak to. You got to take notes of each call. You got to follow up. You've got to just do the blocking and the tackling, things that are not spectacularly complicated, but are part of the process of being an effective operator. You got to apply that mindset to fundraising, and you increase your chances of success by many, many multiples, I suspect. That's number one. And then number two, I really think this is something it took me a while to learn. But I think when you're fundraising, especially if you're running a business where it's highly ambitious, it's one of these companies where you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, which I certainly think we've been trying to do. It's important that you don't go out trying to convince people that your vision of the world is going to come to pass. What you're trying to do is find believers. You're trying to find the people who actually agree with you and just need to be told and explained how you've got the right team to get it done. And that is a really big shift. It's when you're trying to convince people that I think you get disheartened when you hear no. And it's also more exhausting because you're constantly trying to handle objections when really what you want is someone who agrees with you on the direction of the world and just needs help being guided on that journey as you see it. And that filters out a lot of people and gives you the opportunity to focus in on the investors who are going to make a difference. Because if you convince someone to invest in you because you knew some fact or you made some argument or you spanned some story, there's no guarantee it's going to last. And you're really taking these people on a journey. It's going to last 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years potentially. You want people on that journey who at the end of the day fundamentally believe in you and your game plan. And that will make the whole process much better. So that's something I've really tried to select for, is investors who believed in what we're doing and believed in us. Just know that fundraising is one of those processes that only ends when you stop. And you should stop at some point, but make sure you've given it everything before you do. It only takes one person to believe in you to get the whole thing moving. And I found that when someone invests, others often will follow. And so keep going, don't give in, and don't let yourself be dissuaded by the statistics. They're true. They're not fake. They're very real. But you can, as an entrepreneur, it's your job to bend the odds of success. That's really what you do. And so I encourage you to treat fundraising the same way.
And finally, the winner of our top 40-minute mentor founder of 2024 is Rada VS, co-founder of Flashpack, one of my favorite people and a very deserved winner, who shares the incredible story of scaling her business from almost losing it in lockdown to then creating one of the fastest growing companies in the UK.
First 6 months were absolutely grueling. So we were quite naive. And like I said, didn't really understand the concept of MVP. So invested this money in a website, created these cutting edge products. And then nothing happened for 6 months. The phone rang. I mean, we had a physical phone back then, and the phone rang once. I answered it and it was a wrong number. So, I mean, that gives you how well it was going. You know, to convince people to spend £2,000 plus with a company they'd never heard of, that had no social proof, you know, it was very, very difficult. We were flying really high. We were just about to kind of achieve our first 20 million GMV that year. We had a staff of about 60, 65 people in London. We were raising a Series A, a big Series A round. We were being inundated with offers from VCs. I mean, we could get into a room with a partner with anyone we wanted, Index, Excel. Like Excel was sending me baby gifts in the post. I just had a baby. We felt invincible, quite frankly. We'd gone around doing teaser meetings with about 30 different VCs around London, and we had chosen 4 to take into the next round. I had American VCs saying, oh, look, you know, we'll fly to London and visit you. And this was about February time. They said, oh, well, there's a bit of a ban on travel because of COVID, rolling their eyes. But, you know, we'll come to London next week. Like, nobody was taking COVID seriously. I remember we were in a meeting with Excel, and the partners asked Lee, what keeps us up at night? And Lee said COVID. And he just shrugged it off and laughed and said, well, okay, yeah, fine. What else? You know, nobody was taking it seriously, but we could see it coming around the corner. And we were just trying to get the raise done really, really quickly. We'd chosen 4 VCs and we were just about to go into DD. This was early March. And then Trump closed the borders on March the 13th, 5 p.m. UK time. I'll never forget it. And that was it. Revenue dropped 95% overnight, like that, gone. And all the VCs went quiet. Everything fell through.
Thanks so much for joining me in revisiting some of our most popular episodes of 2024. I always love hearing your favorite moments from the podcast and always love listening back to the inspiring mentorship of our guests. But that's enough of us looking back at 2024. It's time to start looking forward to 2025 with a bang. We have got some amazing guests lined up for you this year, and I can't wait to share those conversations with you. So if you haven't done already, please make sure you hit the follow button in the app you're currently listening to and check back next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship. I look forward to seeing you then.